DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi showcases the success of Make in India program. Exports of Indian bicycles to Europe soar. Russia's army using Indian boots. King Charles III opens new UK Parliament session, focuses on revving up the country's economy and tackling housing issues. At least 6 dead in Bangladesh after violent clashes over quota in government jobs. Colleges and universities shut indefinitely. And India calls for United Nations Security Council reform, says the world body is not able to respond to challenges such as terrorism and pandemic. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi hails Make in India success story on the world stage. He shared a glimpse on social media of how Make in India propels the country's economy onto the global stage. Indian bicycles are becoming a global sensation with exports surging to the UK, Germany and the Netherlands. This growth highlights India's rising influence in international markets. Made in Bihar boots are now part of the Russian Army's gear, showcasing the unexpected global reach of Indian products. It reflects India's growing influence in international defense markets and the high quality of its manufacturing capabilities. Kashmir willow bats were in high demand as the World Cup approached, solidifying their status as a global favorite. These bats exemplify India's superior craftsmanship and significant impact on the international cricket scene. Amul is taking India's unique flavors to the world, launching its products in the US. Now, this international expansion highlights the global appeal of Indian dairy products and Amul's commitment to spreading the taste of India worldwide. India's UPI is now global, enabling seamless digital payments in multiple countries. This technological advancement underscores India's leadership in fintech innovation and its commitment to revolutionizing digital transactions worldwide. The BrahMos missiles, a joint venture between India and Russia, are now operational in the South China Sea. This development emphasizes India's strategic defense capabilities and significant role in enhancing global security. Indian products dominated Amazon's Black Friday and Cyber Monday sales, highlighting their global appeal. This success story showcases the international demand for made in India items and India's growing presence in global e-commerce markets. The Asian Development Bank on Wednesday maintained India's GDP growth forecast at 7% for the current fiscal year, citing that a rebound in agriculture is expected given above normal monsoon projections. ADB's July outlook said India's agriculture sector, which is expected to rebound with forecasts for an above normal monsoon, will be important to sustain economic growth in rural areas. It said that investment demand led by public investment remains strong. ADB's forecast comes a day after the International Monetary Fund revised upward its GDP growth projections for India to 7% as compared to 6.8% projected in April. India has once again called for much needed reforms at the UN, starting with the United Nations Security Council. Delivering India's statement at a UNSC open debate, India's Chargé d'Affaires R. Ravindra said, multipolarity being witnessed in the world today is here to stay.
Multipolarity, as we are witnessing it now, is here to stay. The primary reason the multilateral system has failed to deliver is that it is still stuck in a 1945 vintage binary outlook reflected clearly in the composition of this Security Council. The core of India's position on reformed multilateralism, therefore, lies in a call for the reform of the UN Security Council that is reflective of contemporary realities of today. For multilateral cooperation to deliver, it must emanate from a representation of developing countries in all major decision-making bodies, especially in the peace and security architecture. As we convene for the Summit of the Future, let us recommit to time-bound negotiations on UNSC reforms. The multilateral system cannot deliver without the sustained commitment of major powers and groups to global institutions and a rules-based order. And in this context, it is important that all must adhere to the basic building block of international cooperation, which is good faith negotiations. Sabotaging of negotiating processes and mechanisms by big countries or groups in the narrow interest of their own positions is detrimental to the multilateral spirit and must be called out wherever necessary.
The opening of UK Parliament to mark the official start of the new Labour government's time in office began with King Charles III delivering the King's Speech on Wednesday. In his speech, the King said that securing economic growth will be a fundamental mission for the government.
Stability will be the cornerstone of my government's economic policy, and every decision will be consistent with its fiscal rules. It will legislate to ensure that all significant tax and spending changes are subject to an independent assessment by the Office for Budget Responsibility. Bills will be brought forward to strengthen audit and corporate governance alongside pension investment.
On Ukraine, the King said that his government will continue to give its full support to Ukraine.
My government will continue to give its full support to Ukraine and its people, and it will endeavour to play a leading role in providing Ukraine with a clear path to NATO membership. My government will play its part in trying to secure long-term peace and security in the Middle East.
And Stuart Smith sent us this report from London.
There were no surprises in that announcement, which isn't guaranteed. A government midway through its term at a new state opening of Parliament could, for example, drop bills that have been previewed or add detail to new bills which were expected. Especially when the government has a small majority, it's not uncommon to see previewed bills watered down or scrapped completely, perhaps due to pushback from lawmakers within the government's party or from the public. But this was straight down the line, exactly as the Labour government had promised in its manifesto when seeking election. A signal from the new Prime Minister Keir Starmer to the country, reportedly about trust, confidence and projecting stability. So no surprises, quite deliberately, from that 130-page manifesto. It was as expected. Planning reform, pay reform, nationalisation of aspects of the UK's transport and energy system. 40 bills in total, which the government has ostensibly 5 years to get through Parliament before a new general election has to be called. As to what happens now, lawmakers will go back to the House of Commons to debate some of the aspects of what was announced. The Prime Minister will have a chance to sell the King's Speech, while King Charles has to read in a neutral, deadpan voice, not his words, but he's the one reading them. It's now Keir Starmer's chance, the new Prime Minister, to sell this to lawmakers, and then the leader of the opposition, the former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, will have a chance to respond to what the Labour government is promising for the country.
In more news from Europe, French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal and his government resigned on Tuesday but will stay on in a caretaker capacity until a new cabinet is appointed. Experts say the caretaker government will run current affairs in the Eurozone's second largest economy but cannot submit new laws to Parliament or make any major changes. Its role will include making sure the Olympics that start on the 26th of July run smoothly. Who becomes President of the Assembly, which is equivalent to a Speaker who organizes the Chamber's agenda and runs debates, is crucial at a time when it is not clear who will run the government, as no party or group has an absolute majority following an inconclusive snap election. A left-wing alliance that won the 7th July election has so far been unable to agree on a potential candidate to replace Attal. Europe's second top court on Wednesday said the European Commission did not give public sufficient access to the purchase agreements for COVID-19 vaccines during the pandemic, upholding a challenge brought by EU lawmakers against the EU executive's handling of the deals. The EU executive signed a number of large contracts to secure vaccines from pharmaceutical companies at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 and 2021. European Parliament lawmakers wanted to examine the contracts to understand the terms and conditions, but were only given partial access, while some documents were redacted, with the Commission saying that this was done to protect commercial interests and the decision-making process. The lawmakers subsequently took their grievances to the Luxembourg-based General Court, which said that the Commission had not demonstrated that access to certain clauses would have undermined the commercial interests of companies involved. EU Parliament's President Roberta Metsola said that the Parliament's organising body will again discuss how the institution will engage with Hungary while it holds EU's rotating presidency, following criticism of Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban on his recent visits to Russia and China on a self-styled peace mission to end the conflict in Ukraine.
Showed with a strong parliament we can do great things. You can only succeed in this parliament if you build bridges, if you create alliances. And that is what I sought to do as from the very first day. I was elected 2.5 years ago, and it is one that I have pledged to do during this latest campaign for me to be re-elected. It is one where I think we can create the best majorities, which is a pro-European platform for the future.
A media report has claimed that the United States had received intelligence about a plot by Iran to assassinate Donald Trump. The Secret Service shared details of an increased threat with the Trump campaign. Though the White House has declined to comment, there were no indications that the suspected 20-year-old shooter had any foreign or domestic accomplices. Following the threat alerts, security around Trump has been increased. Meanwhile, Iran's mission to the United Nations in New York said the accusations are unsubstantiated and malicious. U.S. officials have for years worried that Tehran would retaliate against Trump for ordering a January 2020 assassination of Iranian military commander Qasem Soleimani. An assassination attempt on Trump has united the Republican Party ahead of the 2024 presidential election. Trump's former rivals offered full-throated endorsement of his candidacy at a party convention.
It was a grand show of the grand old party as it readies to go full throttle for the November 5 polls, with Donald Trump firmly entrenched in the driver's seat and J.D. Vance as his running mate. Any doubts of division within the ranks was addressed thoroughly and comprehensively by the speakers, many of whom stood against Trump in the party primaries. Nikki Haley offered a full-throated endorsement of Donald Trump's candidacy. She had described Trump as unelectable and unfit for office during her campaign.
We should acknowledge that there are some Americans who don't agree with Donald Trump 100% of the time. I happen to know some of them. You don't have to agree with Trump 100% of the time to vote for him. Take it from me, I haven't always agreed with President Trump.
The conservative Florida Governor DeSantis, whose campaign sputtered early in the year, attacked Biden as too old for the job.
Biden is just a figurehead. He's a tool for imposing a leftist agenda on the American people. They support open borders, allowing millions and millions of illegal aliens to pour into our country and to burden our communities, but just don't send any to Martha's Vineyard, then they get really upset.
Trump has pledged to launch the largest deportation effort in US history. Former GOP presidential contender Vivek Ramaswamy took the stage and delivered an impassioned speech backing Donald Trump.
That the media doesn't want you to hear from the Republican Party. Our message to black Americans is this. The media has tried to convince you for decades that Republicans don't care about your communities, but we do. We want for you what we want for every American. Safe neighborhoods, clean streets, good jobs, a better life for your children, and a justice system that treats everyone equally, regardless of your skin color and regardless of your political beliefs.
In the wake of the shooting, however, voters' fear about the deeply polarized nation ahead of November 5 election seem only to have deepened. Authorities have yet to identify a motive for the shooting. The show of harmony at the Republican National Convention was intended to contrast with Democrats, who have spent weeks mired in intra-party tensions over whether Biden should abandon his re-election bid after his halting June 27 debate performance against Trump. Vidarthi Rana, Siddharth for DD India.
And still to come on DD India Live. The US tells its allies that it is considering using the most severe trade restrictions available on China. And Rwanda's President Paul Kagame wins the country's presidential election with 99% of the vote.
While there's still enough food for everyone on the planet, food shortages are a real problem. Let's take a look at the factors causing this and what can be done to save our food.
What we host now, it's called Farm School. One of the goals is to teach them agriculture so that 50 years from now, when there's so much change in climate, they don't have to deal with learning two new skills.
We empower women who are really poor and who don't have too much economic empowerment to eat better.
We adopt this strategy in our product. The volatile compounds induce the defence mechanism and help to prolong shelf life by 2 more days. So it's purely natural.
You're watching DD India Live. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. The US has told its allies it is considering using the most severe trade restrictions available on China if companies continue giving the country access to advanced semiconductor technology. These measures would be applied to companies such as Tokyo Electron and ASML Holding. The US is weighing whether to impose a measure called the Foreign Direct Product Rule. And now the latest on the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Russia and Ukraine have exchanged 95 prisoners of war from each side after the United Arab Emirates acted as an intermediary. Even Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed the developments, saying Kiev has swapped 95 Ukrainian prisoners of war in a swap with Russia. Zelensky thanked the United Arab Emirates for its help in facilitating the swap. Earlier, both countries had conducted a few prisoner swaps in the 27-month-old conflict that started after Russia launched a special military operation in Ukraine. China and Russia began the joint live-fire naval exercises codenamed Maritime Cooperation 2024 in the South China Sea. The opening ceremony of the exercise took place in the Chinese port of Zhanjiang. Both countries were to deploy at least 3 vessels each for the 3-day exercise. The vessels set off from Zhanjiang on Monday. A Russian state news agency reported on Tuesday that the Russian Navy and the Chinese Navy conducted artillery firing as part of the joint drills. The Philippines and China have agreed to set up new lines of communication to improve their handling of maritime disputes as ties sour over clashes about territory in the South China Sea. According to a document and a Filipino diplomatic source, 3 communication channels would be established specifically for maritime issues. The 2 countries have traded barbs repeatedly over jurisdiction in the contested South China Sea as the Philippines, emboldened by support of defense ally the United States, challenges China's permanent presence around strategic features inside Manila's exclusive economic zone. Rwanda's President Paul Kagame has won the country's presidential election with 99% of the vote, according to preliminary results released by the country's Electoral Commission. The head of the electoral body says they have counted more than 80% of the votes. However, full provisional results are due only by 20th July and definitive results by the 27th. Chris Okamringa has more from Kinshasa, the capital of the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Partial results announced by Rwanda's Electoral Commission show incumbent President Paul Kagame with a clear lead of 99%. The 66-year-old leader received more than 7 million votes out of over 9 million ballots cast. His closest challenger, Frank Habineza, garnered 38,000 votes, while independent candidate Philip Mpayimana got 22,700 votes. Their tallies were less than 1% of the vote. President Kagame ran against them in the country's last elections in 2017 and won by a similar margin. The country's Electoral Commission barred a prominent opponent of Kagame from running in this year's polls for reportedly failing to provide the required paperwork. The results will extend President Kagame's 24-year rule by another 5 years. He thanked Rwandans for their trust in an address at his party headquarters in Kigali. Vote counting is still going on and provisional results are expected to be announced on July 20th. President Kagame has been the de facto leader of Rwanda since 1994 and officially became president in 2000. His critics accuse him of stifling dissent and sponsoring rebels to destabilize neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo. But his supporters praise him for restoring peace and building the country that was devastated by the genocide of 1994, where 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus were killed by Hutu extremists. Chris Ochamringa in Kinshasa, reporting for DD India.
Anti-quota protesters clash with police and ruling Awami League party affiliated student wing, the Bangladesh Chhatra League, in the country, leaving at least 6 people dead and several injured. The border guard Bangladesh personnel have been deployed to maintain law and order situation amid an ongoing quota reform movement across the country. All schools and universities will remain closed until further notice. The protests began earlier this month when the High Court ordered the government to reinstate the 30% job quota. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar met former Mauritius Prime Minister Naveen Ramgoolam on Wednesday. They discussed the enduring bilateral partnership between the 2 countries and expressed a mutual desire for its further development. Minister Jaishankar also met another former Mauritius Prime Minister Paul Berenger. The discussions covered contemporary global issues. Minister Jaishankar is on his maiden visit to Mauritius after his reappointment. The minister also met the leader of opposition, Dr. Arvind Boulel, and discussed the bilateral relationship and its significance for the prosperity and well-being of the wider Indian Ocean region. The village defense guards have successfully secured key positions in the Dessa area after an intense hour-long gun battle with terrorists in Doorda district of India's Jammu and Kashmir. In the aftermath, the Doorda forest has been cordoned off following a deadly terror attack in Urrar Bagi, where 4 soldiers, including an army captain, were martyred. The situation remains tense as security forces continue their operations to ensure the area is cleared of any remaining threats. India's former Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla paid tributes to Captain Brajesh Thapa at Bengdubi military station at Siliguri in Darjeeling. The Ashura-e-Muharram is being observed with due reverence and solemnity across India on Wednesday. The day marks the martyrdom of Prophet Muhammad's grandson Hazrat Imam Hussain and his companions who laid down their lives to uphold truth, righteousness and justice in Karbala. The majalis or religious meetings highlighting the supreme sacrifice of Karbala martyrs are being organized. Elaborate security arrangements have been made on the occasion. With only 8 days to go for the Paris Olympics, the Indian Olympic Association has officially released the list of athletes for the Summer Games. India will be sending 117 athletes, including 7 reserves. Athletics is the biggest group in the contingent with 29 members, followed by a 21-member shooting team and a 19-player hockey squad. 8 players will represent India in table tennis, while badminton will feature 7 competitors, including 2-time Olympic medalist PV Sindhu. Wrestling, archery and boxing will have 6 representatives each. Golf has 4 Indian players, tennis has 3, 2 each from swimming and sailing, and 1 each for equestrian, judo, rowing and weightlifting. The final contingent also features 140 support staff and officials. The Games will run from 26 July to the 11th of August. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of DD India Live. You can get all the latest news and updates on the DD India mobile app. It's available on Android and iOS platforms. You can scan the QR code on the screen to download it. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X and Instagram. You can also check out our website ddindia.co.in. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. From all of us here in New Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Live.